Hello all, Rick here with a look into a strange and unnerving sighting from Star Trek Canon, the Elachi. Star Trek is still full of unexplained mysteries and plots that were not addressed on screen, such as the origin of the aliens in Conspiracy, the self-repairing station, or the subject of this video, the silent enemy antagonists. The species was featured when they came across the Enterprise NX-01 in late August 2151, as it was routinely deploying subspace buoys. A ship of unfamiliar design approached them from the depths of space, and when noticed, it ignored the Enterprise's handshake, prevented scans, and left. When it returned, it fired upon the Enterprise, but then retreated once more, proving hostile intent. Eventually, they even beamed two of their own onto the ship, where they were glimpsed in the darkened halls bent over a fallen crewman doing something. A phase pistol direct hit did seemingly nothing to them, yet they retreated anyway. Medical evaluations of the downed crew revealed that they had been the subject of invasive scans and readings, suggesting this had been a raid to gather intel. The spindly creatures were completely unidentified, and when they did communicate, it was through parroting back Captain Archer's own message of warning to him. An eerie and unknown antagonist that prompted the Enterprise to properly arm itself with the precursor to the phaser systems before venturing out further. Several tales have ascribed motivation and meaning to these aliens, referring to them as the Elachi, and some interesting facets to their biology. They're actually a fungal life form that, after the inclusion of the mycelial plane from Discovery, had that retconned as their native plane of existence. This area is home to its own ecosystem and several other sentient life forms, so for it to be the origin of the Elachi, it actually fits in rather well. There's also ties into further lore, which I'll get to later. The reason Elachi seem to kidnap humanoid life forms is dualfold, but the initial reason is procreation. As fungal life, they require a substrate in which to develop, and that is found in the bodies of their captives. Seized individuals, after being deemed compatible, are brought back to their bases and infected with their spores. This leads the host to slowly be consumed by the spreading fungus until it takes over completely, replacing every cell in the host body until a new Elachi is made from the remains. Prior to this method, however, they were perfectly happy to remain in the mycelial network, and only seem to have adopted this method of reproduction in the face of leaving it. In a novel series that followed the events of Star Trek Enterprise and the Earth-Romulan War, the Elachi are briefly developed, and their origin is understood to be a dark planet, a planet that has drifted away from its star, or at least this one is one of their major bases. Because they are so alien in form, their motivations were ascribed to simply not understanding how different life was, assuming that humanoid forms were rather primitive. Sure, buddy, you just ignored the spaceships that the Enterprise crew were travelling around in, and did not consider a spoken language as signs of intelligence. Now, in Star Trek Online, these beings are also operating as servitors to the Iconians in preparation for their return, gathering data and experimenting on the Milky Way inhabitants, but that is a massive addition to the lore to just throw in. This was supposedly the reason for their radicalization in leaving the mycelial network, as the Iconians persuaded them to serve. As the network resides in a subspace domain, the species was already suited for and rather adept at living outside of regular space-time. As such, their installations and bases were constructed deep in subspace pockets, where they hid beyond the detection of most. They are not the only species to reside in such subspace areas. The Nacine entity Suspiria is another, for example. From these bases, they raided all throughout the Alpha and Beta quadrants, leaving rumour and tales of their passing. Strange ships descending silently on lone vessels, testing them before returning with the intent to capture. By the 22nd and 24th centuries, most of the focus was around the fringes of the Federation and Romulan territory. Accompanying the encounter with the Enterprise, the Romulans had tales of miners in the Iridian Belt uncovering Elachi beacons, who returned to reclaim the technology. But the encounters were dismissed as paranoia and superstition. It was in 2409 that they made their overt move, in preparation for the full return of the Iconian remnants. The Elachi had been descending on the fractured Romulan colony worlds, now deprived of the Star Empire, or much else in the way of defences. These worlds went dark, and it was not until Virinat, an agricultural Romulan settlement, was attacked that word managed to escape to the Romulan populace at large of these Elachi abductions. Their purpose was not only to catch more fodder for their growth, but to destabilise any attempt the Romulans might have at presenting a united challenge to the Iconians when they returned in the following year. It was during these skirmishes that one of their subspace bases was discovered, and the connection to the Iconians raised, as well as the purpose of the abducted colonists as conversion to feed and birth more Elachi. Steps were taken to combat them, and after the Iconians' defeat, some unexpected results manifested. Some of the converted Elachi began to remember their hosts' lives, and the former personalities reasserted themselves, creating a faction within the Elachi that wanted to return to the mycelial network and simply live. These peaceful Elachi made contact in 2411, and tentative diplomatic ties were established. However, many of the Elachi are still directionless, without their Iconian leaders or subject to the ravages of the mycelial network, and descending into insanity. That is their tale in Star Trek Online, and while it provides a great deal of background information and history to them, it's all tied into the giant sweeping changes of Iconian plots and schemes that makes the central narrative of that game. As for appearing on screen, well, they kind of appeared once more in Star Trek Picard, but very indirectly. Several ships were seen, small fighter-like interceptors in the first episode of Season 3, and these were Elachi ships borrowed from Star Trek Online's expansive ship catalogue of licensed creations. Now, I would just pass it off as a case of borrowing a non-canon ship to repurpose for a quick on-screen appearance. However, there was a behind-the-scenes document put out that covered the origin of these vessels. As part of Vadic's small fleet, these ships were procured through the black market and were described as salvaged Elachi vessels. While not much of the Elachi was known, these ships had been captured by the Romulan Star Empire several years ago when a patrol intercepted them. In the years following the Empire's collapse, salvage and resources often slipped through the cracks, and these were such vessels. The computer systems had been completely wiped, and required a rebuild, but the ships were operable and purchased from a Commander Ravana of the Azure Sector Imperial Impound Yard 37. Honestly, I think the inclusion of the mycelial network as their origin point makes a lot more sense, and I love the horrific reason for taking captives. I'm not sure about the Iconian element added to the lore of the shows, as that is a major thing to include, but the fungal biology does well to match that eerie look, and it has this alien feel of just... It's all very cordyceps of them. But what is created is not a mindless fungal husk, but a new being. Kind of like the Kabali repurposing a corpse to a new life form. Evil creatures or just trying to survive? There's a cool Trek-style dilemma there to explore, and the whole thing adds some much-needed depth and detail to an area of Star Trek lore that I feel really needs more development, that being the subspace fungal network, where the idea is cool. With their ships turning up on screen but being referred to as Elachi vessels in external documents, there is still a great deal of mystery around them. Thanks for watching this breakdown on just what the Elachi are, the silent enemy of Enterprise. Not every mystery of Star Trek needs explaining away, but in this case I feel the added depth and lore does enough to replace the mystery to make it worthwhile. What do you think? Should I do a video deep dive into their culture at some point? Thanks again. I've been Rick, and goodbye.